Have you ever noticed how Christians are always trying to justify slavery in the Bible? And then when somebody points out that the slavery in the Bible and the slavery that happened in the transatlantic slave trade, the slavery that was happening in the Roman Empire, slavery that was happening all throughout Europe, throughout most of the world, was exactly how the Bible describes it. So the God of the Bible does approve slavery. But this man tried to say that I was being dishonest. Let's take a look. Hold on. And we're going to run this shit into the ground. Because you Christians and you Bible believers, you don't have any types of integrity because you know abhor slavery today. You want to separate your God from this slavery, but we're going to break it down in the next 9 minutes. He said it simply is dishonest to talk about beating a slave in Exodus 21 while ignoring verse 18 through 20. I'm going to get to that. If a master beats the slave to death, the master is put to death. If he beats the slave, hospitalize him, he shall pay for the loss of his time and shall and have him thoroughly healed and shall have him thoroughly healed. The law doesn't allow for beating of slaves the way our laws that says if someone murders another doesn't allow for murder. I don't think you've actually read the Bible. I think you've had somebody just preach this to you because I'm going to break this down for you so that you can clearly understand it. Now, to do so, we're going to start at the beginning of 21. And I'm not going to read every word of it, but you can. But at the beginning of every one of it, it says, now these are the ordinances which you shall set before them. This is God talking to Moses. When you buy a Hebrew slave. So right there, it indicates that the type of slavery that it's talking about in Exodus 21 is Hebrew to Hebrew. Not like how it talked about in Exodus 25, where you can buy slaves as property from the foreign nations. But this is Hebrew to Hebrew. So let's start there. Now, if you continue reading this one, it will let you know that if you buy a Hebrew slave and he comes to you single, and yet you give him the master gives him a wife and they have children, then the wife and the child becomes his property forever. So a Hebrew woman and the child of a Hebrew woman becomes property that they can have forever. Now, if that man loves his wife and loves his child and want to be with his child and his wife, then he is to be taken to the temple, putting all in his ear, drilling all through his ear, and then he becomes a slave forever. But if he doesn't, he can leave after 6 years. So you're breaking up families. But that's only Hebrew to Hebrew. Like I said, Exodus 25 of the foreigners, just like the transatlantic slave trade, you can make them into slaves forever. Anyone who's not of your tribe. So when the British made the Irish, the Anglicans made the Irish their slaves, they can make them slaves permanently. If they're not of your tribe, they become your permanent slave. But notice, this is only talking about men. As far as women are concerned, a woman is your slave, your property forever. And her children, the children of a woman slave, are also deemed as property, which is what the Portuguese did in Brazil. If a woman had a slave, if a woman had a child by a slave man, then that child didn't gain the inheritance and that child was a slave permanently. But if the slave master, the male, had a child with a slave woman, that child would gain inheritances and could be set free. So they were serving it just like your Bible says so. Tribe to tribe, foreigners to tribe. Now, check out 7. When a man sells his daughter as a slave, daughters can be sold as slaves. She shall not go out as the male slaves do. That means in the seventh year, she's not set free. If she does not please the master who has designated her for his son, then she shall let her be redeemed. He shall have no rights to sell her to a foreigner since he has dealt faithlessly with her. So he can't sell her to foreigners, and then they can't stop giving her food and clothing and giving her all the rights that she has as a wife, as a slave wife. But she's still a slave wife because it says clearly if he sells her as a slave. So women, why do y'all still follow this book when y'all are no more than property to these people? Let's continue, my good sir, because I can't wait to get to 18. Now, in 12, it starts speaking about just Hebrew man to Hebrew man. That when a Hebrew man strikes another man and he dies, he shall be put to death. So if you murder someone, you're death penalty, just like we have here in America and in most countries, except We may not give you the death penalty. It depends on how heinous it is. This just says if you strike a man and he dies, then you are to kill that man. But if a man willfully attacks another to kill him treacherously, you shall take him from my altar, and he may die. Damn. Damn. So whether you strike him and you didn't mean to, or you strike him and you mean to, death penalty. Either way. Now they do have sanctuary cities that they talk about later on, where if somebody kills somebody, manslaughter, accidentally, that the person waits there until they can have a trial to see if they're going to be put to death. And that way to make sure the families don't come after him. But right here, it's talking about if you strike another man, but they're talking about Hebrew to Hebrew man, not slave. So you see what I'm saying? Whoever curses his father and mother shall be put to death. Whoever steals a man, I skipped that one. Whoever steals a man, whether he sells him or is found in possession of him, shall be put to death. This is Hebrew to Hebrew. This is not foreigners. 25 clearly says, from the foreigners you may buy your male and female slaves. Now let's get to what he was talking about in 18. If men quarrel, slave master and slave don't quarrel. When men quarrel, get into an argument, get into a fight, and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and the man does not die but keeps his bed, then if the man rises again and walks abroad with a staff, he that struck him shall be clear. So as long as he can walk with a staff, only he shall pay for the loss of his time and shall have him heal him thoroughly healed. This is talking Hebrew to Hebrew. This is not slavery, property slavery. This is not the chattel slavery that was in America. That's in 25. So what are you talking about, my guy? And then when it says you got to heal him thoroughly. Now, when I was talking about in verse 20, when a man strikes his slave, you see they created the separation there again. See, first they were talking about slave, Hebrew slave to Hebrew slave. Then talking about women being enslaved and their property forever. Then it talks about just men fighting other men, striking other men, death penalties, and things of that nature. It makes a clear distinction in 20 when a man strikes his slave. Still talking about a Hebrew slave, but strikes his slave. And he does not die in his hand, he shall be punished. But if the slave survives for 2 or 3 days, then the man is not punished. That doesn't mean he doesn't die. The slave can still die. But as long as it takes about 3 days to die, then it's perfectly fine for you to strike your slaves. So you can beat your slaves in the Bible. And as far as when you're talking about, you were talking about 18 and 19, my guy, that's just two men fighting. That's just two men fighting. So what you're demonstrating is that you heard something from a pastor, or you read that, but you read it with your own confirmation bias. Your bias that says that I want to create a separation from the slavery that happened in the Americas, and any other country in Africa, in Europe, in Asia. I want to separate those as people doing evil things outside of the Bible, yet claiming to be believers of this Bible. But any way you slice it, when you read this Bible, your God condones these slaveries. It started out by telling you that he was commanding Moses to say this to the Hebrew people, that if you get a Hebrew slave, then you're to set him free, unless you give him a family. And then if he wants to be with his family, then he becomes a permanent slave. Otherwise, you got to let him go in the 7th year. But a woman who is sold by her father to a man, whether it be for his son or for himself, even if she's displeasing, she still has to remain a slave. She just can't go free. No, but it does say somebody can redeem her. The family can redeem her back, but they're not going to do that. She's tainted goods now. Her pum pum been tainted. So that's not going to happen. She's going to be a slave forever. And the part about paying a man's wages, that's when two men get into a fight. And we have that in our courts of law today. If you were to cause someone seriously bodily injury, then you are responsible for their lifestyle. It's called civil suits. We do that all the time. So the transatlantic slavery was just like the Bible dictates it. All the other slaveries that has been done under Christianity is exactly how the Bible dictates it. Just admit it and accept it, since you already believe it, because it's not going to matter to your belief anyway. So always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself. because your greatness is non-negotiable.